My name's Josh, and I'm here at our Winter Park store in Orlando on Aloma Avenue. We're here to talk about our SPS tank in the back of the store. It's a 180-gallon tank, and it's 60 inches by 36 by 18 inches tall. It was originally designed as a frag tank in our original farm on Orange Blossom Trail. Now it's a display tank in our Winter Park store. And here it is in all its glory. I think it's incredible. The first thing we'll talk about here on this tank is the lighting. So originally this tank, when we set it up, it had 6 XR15s on it. And they actually had diffusers on them originally. We really liked it, but when they came out with the Gen 5s, we wanted to give them a shot. So we ended up switching the Gen 4 XR15s, and like I said, there were 6 of them, to 5 of the Gen 5 Pros. While we really liked the Pro and an 18-inch deep tank, we went back and forth over this. I actually talked to Patrick at Ecotech, and he's like, you know, for what you guys do and the way you keep your tanks, he's like, just try the blue, you'll probably like it. And we did. We actually switched them out recently in the last 6 or 8 months to XR30 Blues. I think it was a really good move, but there was a learning curve. They were a lot stronger than the 6 XR15s, and while we turned them down, being it's only 18 inches deep, and if you look at where the corals are in the tank, they're only about 6, maybe 5 inches beneath the surface of the water. So that had a big impact on how much light was actually hitting the coral, and we lost a lot of color. So needless to say, it's been through a lot of ups and downs. We're happy with the 5 XR30s. We've got right now 2 MP40s on the right hand side of the tank. We've got 2 MP40s on the left hand side of the tank. The return is a Vectra L2, kind of in a standard for what we have now. Most of our tanks right now are run by L2s. We like the controllability, and you know, for that size pump to put out 3,000 gallons per hour, it's very versatile for us. We have a custom template that we use for 3 of these power heads. So that delivers the flow inside of the display, and then the one on the back side just kind of sweeps the bottom to keep the detritus pushed forward. And while most don't want the detritus in the front, it's easy for us to clean it that way. So in standard fashion, you know, this is a bare bottom tank, going back to our origins here. It's easy to clean, you know, it looks good with the bare bottom. It's got the core line. You know, we used a black HDPE, or a high density polyethylene bottom. Some people call it starboard. And it gives it that impact resistance on the bottom. The core line sticks really well to it. And overall, it just makes the look very seamless. So this tank was started with Haitian rock, which, you know, I wish we could get more of. It's something that was our go-to for the longest time. It's no longer collected. This tank is dosed with kalkwasser, just like most of our other tanks. It runs through auto top off. We don't actually take a lot of water out of this system, so we can use a formal auto top off. Most of our stuff we top off manually, just so that we can avoid all those salinity swings, you know, which are very detrimental to the health of the coral. The calc stir is a Octo 150. We use a Acropora 4-head dosing pump. It delivers aminos, it delivers calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium in the event that the kalkwasser can't keep up, which it does for the most part, so the doser is actually only there for redundancy. So the skimmer we use on this tank is actually a Regal 200 with a DC pump, and we also run a Pentair 40-watt UV. As you can see, the water's crystal clear. So that in this case, it wasn't 100% necessary, but we do like that clean water for a display tank. This tank is very, very low maintenance. We do a 30-gallon water change once a week on it. Aside from keeping up on the standard practices, like making sure that the calc stir has fresh kalkwasser, topping off the reservoirs for the dosing pump, and making sure that the tubes are operable on them, I mean, there's really not much here. We scrape the back panel just like all of our other display tanks. We clean the glass once a day. We feed the fish very frequently. You know, like we talked about in all of our other tanks, we try to do that on the hour. Most of the time, I can tell you it happens more religiously around 6 or 7 times in a day. But even to that point, it's a lot of food. So we feed these fish our reef mix, which we make in-house. And because we feed so much of it, we wanted a little bit more controlled source, right? So this way we know what's going into the tank. It's an easy way to input organics. These fish waste a lot and they do it all day long. We can't possibly feed that much or that frequently, so we allow the fish to do it for us. And in a tank like this where there's so many living polyps, they need food and they need a lot of it. So that's why you see us feed so much and talk about food, because it's so important to the coloration and the growth of the coral. For the fish in this tank, we have a chocolate mimic, we have a swallowtail angelfish, a copper band butterfly, a couple of yellow tangs, a coupang damsel, a pair of black snowflake clowns. Oh yeah, don't forget about the stark eye damsel, one of my favorites out of Tonga. He's a super nice fish. And of course, a whole bunch of hermit crabs. Somebody's got to do some work around here. So obviously you can see this tank is predominantly Acropora. It's nice to actually see them when they're large. You know, a lot of times you look at a display and you see either a small colony or just a frag. Here we're able to let them actually get a little bit bigger. And you can see how they grow naturally. Oftentimes you see a Walt Disney, just this little tiny frag, but it's nice to see a chunk like this with good polyp extension, the blue tips, the pink on the corallites, and the green in the base, and of course that nice yellow polyp. To name a couple, we've got the Kobe bean acro in the back, the fox flame, the CB pink tip. This one we call ice dragon, which is a favorite of mine. We've got our jello shot acro in the back, a couple of Recordia over here on the side beneath the power head. Also another coral you wouldn't expect to see in an acro tank. And then there's a couple. There's some right here. There's actually a handful of them. And then there's another couple here. You know, a lot of these are found in really shallow water in southern Florida, or the Keys, whatever have you. But if you think about its natural habitat, that's a lot of light right there beneath the surface of the water, and it's really warm. So to go hand in hand with acros, it usually doesn't make sense, but now that you see it, it kind of does. The zoanthids were a relatively new addition to the bottom of the tank. That's why they're smaller in size, but some handle it, some don't. You know, the Grandmaster cracks are nice and small and really, really dense in color, but they're tiny, and that's because it's high flow and high light. So they're not in their perfect setting there, but it's nice to see them in a different form. But I mean, I think it's executed well. The shape is nice, the way that the corals are laid out is nice. But I think after we do this video, we're probably gonna do some changing around. We get a lot of questions about what parameters do we keep in our tanks. I can tell you specifically the reason why we keep what we keep. Acropora need a very, very stable environment, and they can live in an unstable environment, but they're never gonna be really healthy, thriving, and colorful unless it's stable. So there is that misconception. They can be in low flow, they can be in low light, they can be in an unstable parameter. But the problem is they go dark. They go into like this stage where they just reserve all of their energy to staying alive. And the reason why we keep the parameters that we do is because it's right in the middle. If it falls a little bit low, it's not gonna kill things. If it goes a little bit high, it's not gonna kill things. So the alkalinity that we shoot for is that 8 or 9 range. You know, like I was saying, it's not 7 and it's not 6. And while that's still semi-acceptable, it's not gonna kill them. But again, if it goes to 9 or 10, it's acceptable, but it's not in that perfect range. So 8 or 9 is a good number to shoot for as long as it stays the same. You know, 400 to 500 calcium, right in the middle of the road. As long as it stays there, it's not gonna kill anything and it's gonna thrive. Our magnesium, we keep anywhere from 12 to 14 and change. And in most cases, that's going to be fine. I guess my point is, pick a number and stick with it. It really doesn't necessarily matter what that number is, as long as it's in the acceptable range. Our nitrates and our phosphates in this tank, they're relatively low. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's so many corals in the tank for so much water. But you can see the corals are really rich in color. So we don't feel the need to strip it any further lower, which I think at the last point that we tested at our phosphates were at 0.05. And I think our nitrates were at like 10. And don't hold me to that, but I want to say it was right around 10. You can't have a perfectly stable nitrate and phosphate level unless, of course, you always put in the same amount of food, unless you never lose a fish, unless you don't add any fish, unless you do the exact same water change on the exact same day every single time. And it gets too tricky, so we don't really stick to that number. The number is very hard to chase, so we try to follow a trend. And in this case, our trend is below 25 for nitrate and below 0.1 for phosphate. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed the tank. I mean, Acropora being my favorite of all different types of coral, so this ranks on my list, highly on my list. For those of you who have comments, make sure you leave them in the section below. We try to answer those as frequently as possible. Make sure you like and subscribe because we value your input.